All right, so this is going to be a little bit about how I edit the episodes for Return to Roshar. So I've made up a little infograph to start with. This is something I've only ever really done without writing it down. I kind of just figured these types of things out along the way. So writing all this down was a bit of a weird one, but if we're going to start at the very beginning, the first thing that you do when you're editing an episode is you start a new Audacity file and you load the MP3 streams to it, which I've done already, as we can see here from this Audacity file. And the next step is to identify the mark points, where we say 3, 2, 1 mark. So we can do that, and we'll do that, for each stream on an individual basis. So we can go ahead and zoom in. I'll go solo for the first stream until I figure out where theirs is. So
I'll start. 1.
Let me just make sure that this is all sourcing to the correct. There we go. That way you don't hear it in the background. Okay, so there's the mark. So I'll do it at the very start of the word. I think I put in the end of the word in the document, but when you're identifying the mark, you can either put it at the beginning or the end of the mark, but this is the word mark here, so I'm just going to use Control-I to split it, and that just creates this division line once I've marked it there. You can also go into Edit or do what is it? Clip boundaries? Yeah, split right there. So I've got the mark for Murtaugh's stream. Oops. Now I'll go back to Cody's stream, go to the beginning here. And that's where Cody says mark right there. So I can go ahead and put a little split there as well. And then you can move it up. So now they're synchronized. At this point, you don't really need anything that happens before that point, and we will delete the mark as well at a later point, but we'll just delete that. So now what's left of the recording is just the mark, and then where everything kicks off from that point. So starting in the next step, I'll go back to the Word document here that I made. So we've identified the mark for each voice stream individually, and we've used the split action function, Control-I, at the start of the word. I'll put end there, so start. And then the first kind of it's kind of a strange thing to do live, but I haven't listened to this yet. I'm doing this all fresh as I can. But the next step, what you've kind of synchronized it, is to really just kind of listen to the first 10 minutes. You're not really trying to listen for the information quite yet. At this point, it's a little bit easier for you to just kind of look for these 3 key things. First, is anyone either too loud or too quiet? And this can change, obviously, if it fluctuates up and down rapidly. That's something you don't want, typically speaking. So this first step is really all about normalizing the audio. And there's a function called normalize, but normalizing in a general sense just means that everything more or less has a relatively consistent peak for the sound. Then you're also going to look for whether any streams have noticeable and consistent background noise, a fan humming, air conditioner, furnace bubbling in the background, whatever it is. If there's a consistent background noise, and whether that's occurring only when the person talks or consistently throughout, can change how we might handle that. And then the last thing, of course, is just that whether the voices are generally in sync or not. Is it totally off? Was the mark off? That's just kind of one of the things that you look for in the first 10 minutes. So I'll go through fixing these issues kind of live as we go through it. I've kind of tried to break it down to the actual tools I use in this process, but it will make probably a bit more sense seeing it as opposed to just reading it, and then it will probably make a little bit more sense. So I don't think you'll be able to actually hear the recorded audio, and I don't think that should matter because I'm not worrying too much about it, but if you'd rather hear it, let me know. I can turn the volume up on it, but I just assumed it probably wouldn't make it too much easier, so. We can see just kind of watching it that, if you watch the Audacity bar, it always bumps it up to the biggest peak that it's encountered up to that point. Everything seems relatively even, so there's not too much of an issue with an overactive noise gate or anything like that. So we won't have to worry too much about doing both, making certain parts louder and certain parts quieter for this stream, which is good. So Murtaugh's voice, again, you can't hear it, but I can. His voice is obviously a little bit quieter. You can tell physically, you can see the peaks are different. So like if we just replay this part, the peak for the sound level is about like at 11. But if we just highlight this random part of Murtaugh's, it peaks at minus 18. So that's something that we'll fix when we're normalizing. That's something I've included in here. And that's, once you've figured out whether the individual stream needs to be fixed, that's when you make sure that they both have around the same volume level. So we'll get to that part next. So I'll skip ahead a little bit because this whole section is the read-in. And I can notice, a little bit of fragments here. If you zoom in Audacity, you can always see like this is indicative somewhat of a little bit of background noise, whether it's mouse clicks, mouth clicks, or just general background noise. This is stuff that we'll work on silencing and getting out later on in a little bit. So if we go back to our Word document real quick, we've got volume's not consistent. That's not too big of an issue. It's relatively consistent, so we don't have to worry too much about compression, but I'll still demonstrate the way that we still want to use compression as the first point of editing, because if we just bump everything up to a normalized higher audio peak, it will also bump up all this background noise too, which is typically not what you want. You want to increase the volume of the speaking voices while leaving everything else lower. So that's what compression is typically used for. So we can kind of take this. There's not any section in here where the volume is too loud, but I'll still give a demo on that at some point later on. But we can start with Murtaugh's volume being too quiet. So we'll start with the compression tool, and I'll just make this double windowed side by side. So if we highlight his entire stream and we go into effect, this is where a lot of the tools that we're going to use are. So what we're going to look for first is compression. So compressor is the tool right here. And you'll get this little pop-up. I put what I typically use to start with in this section. So we'll bump the threshold to -6. We'll have the noise floor at -50. Ratio is 3:1. And then we can leave attack time, release time as they are. So 0.2 seconds and 1 second. We'll leave makeup gain for 0 decibels after off, and then compress based on peaks is checked. Now, one point that I'll pause with compression, and it is very useful to sometimes when you're having trouble, click on the question mark, get a pop-up for, the Wikipedia page for Audacity. Tells you all about what the tool typically does. When you have this compressed based on peaks, this basically acts as an upwards adjustment. So this is typically going to make quieter sounds louder within this range. If you don't have this tick, this box ticked, it will generally make things beyond this range quieter, and then proportionally less within the range as well. So again, the main purpose of using this tool to start is to amplify the voice speaking sections without amplifying the background noise too much. So this is probably one of the steps that takes it a little bit. 20 seconds doesn't seem that much, but there are some tools that do require a bit of time to process. So it's an easy way to accidentally get sidetracked. You're just sitting there waiting for something to finish doing what it's going to do. You look at something else, you lose track of time. So we did not see any significant jump, I don't believe. Nope, we are seeing some increase in amplitude. And we see these kind of big spiked regions that are kind of throwing the whole thing off as far as, they're much higher than everything else. So I might go in here and just take a look at this and then just kind of reduce that way down to like -10. Because otherwise it will just throw off the normalization if it has these erroneous peaks. And those might just be background noises as well. If I was doing this quickly on the fly for myself, I might just go in and listen and cut those bits out. But for the sake of this, this is probably what I would do as well. So I'm just going through and just making sure those big peaks are not that much bigger. There we go. That looks good, and then there's just this one right here. Okay. So that's basically all of those. So now I'm going to run it through the compression again. I just want to see how much more it shifts now that I've removed those erroneous kind of peaks out of everywhere. So I'm also going to bump the noise floor up a little bit, and then I will bump the threshold up here for now. I just want to see how much more it changes at this point. And that's part of what a lot of what this ends up being, is just kind of tinkering and seeing when I do this, how much does it change versus how much when I do this, that kind of stuff. So and the nicest part is if you go too far and if you compress it too much and it starts to sound a little bit robotic, you can always just start over fresh. You can just kind of get a fresh new audio file. So I did see those peaks physically move up a little bit. You can see a couple erroneous stragglers here. Just gonna reduce this bad boy down like I did with the others. And now, after I've done this, so volume too quiet, we've done the compression tool. I did a little bit more, but generally speaking, doing it that one time is typically good. And then what I do at this point is, this is when you use the normalize tool. So we've done the compression tool to kind of bump up some of the quieter audio sections of speaking. And now we can use the normalize to actually make everything at a regular volume. So -3 is the volume I typically work with when I'm editing. I try to have the same volume when I edit every single time. So my headphones are at 80% out of 100. And that just kind of makes sure that I simulate what it will sound like as a listener. And we can see that it didn't really jump up a lot, and that's, like I was saying before, we've got extraneous peaking, which kind of throws off the whole normalization process. So one thing I will do as a quick little aside is I'm going to use what's called a limiter, and it just bumps anything beyond a certain threshold down. So I'm just going to do this really quick. Don't worry too much about this right now. This is just because I'm seeing these super high peaks out of nowhere. Okay, limiter has been applied. All those super crazy high peaks are now limited to at least -6, which means now if I do normalize, they have room to go up for -3. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so everything's gone up a little bit higher, and that's good. Yep, so we're seeing a good, this is what I like to see, a good, when you're zoomed out, a good consistent kind of like, natural up and down flow of voice. You don't want everything at the same exact level of noise, but this is a good sign, is when you see it kind of roughly the same size, but not like exactly the same size. This is good. So now Cody's doesn't actually really need much compression in terms of, there's not too much of a super duper quiet nature to it. So I'm going to just do a normalize on it and see what it looks like. See if it looks appropriate. So went up a little bit. Let me just zoom out. So not bad. I see a bit of like super high peaks, but I'll worry about that when I'm doing a bit more of the actual editing, because this looks good overall. So that's, the first thing that I said to look for. Is the volume consistently too loud or too quiet? That's that kind of thing ticked off. So that's, one of the first things I do, even before I'm really even digging into the editing side. It's just about getting the volume stuff figured for myself. So now next is background noise. And as you can see, when we were messing with Murtaugh's stream here, we see that these formerly empty sections now have this thick band of just kind of consistent background noise. And this is what we don't want. This is something we want to get rid of. So there's a few different tools that can kind of be useful for this. I'm going to listen to it. I'll bump up the desktop audio a little bit so that this might be listenable by you. I want to just know what this sound is. If it's just air, if it's a fan, we can go ahead and play that. It might even be too quiet for you, but to me it just sounds like slight background noise. You can hear a little bit of echo from the headphones, and that's something that you find now and again, is if someone is sitting too close to their microphone with their headphones that aren't properly sealed to their ear or whatever, some of the audio can leak through the headphones into the microphone. So that's on the recording end of things, something just to kind of keep an eye out for. But overall, this has a really consistent level of volume. It's not a fan, it's just kind of background noise, like of life, and just there's nothing like a whirring, nothing like that really concerns me. So I would consider this background noise that doesn't actually occur during a speaking section. I'll still highlight a section here and just give it a listen.
Chapter moves on. It's just Sen being terrified.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that the background noise is purely just because I've bumped up just natural air in the background, and it's not something that's really needs to be used for this noise reduction tool. So what I actually detailed in this document is using the noise reduction tool. I'm actually going to use something different for this specific instance, and that's what's called a noise gate. And I'll add this to this document that I'm going to be sharing it anyway. But while we were doing this, we could observe the peak level for this background noise. It hovers around 33 or less. So that's going to be important for when we take into account this tool. And this is something that I've had issues with doing the entire audio stream at a time. So I'll typically do like 5 minutes for each, 5 minutes at a time even. So first I'll highlight the 5 minutes that I want to work on. And then I'll go into my effects and I'll use, down here is called a noise gate. And I can set a gate threshold, so anything louder than a certain point, it won't touch. But anything quieter than a certain point, it will reduce. And this attack decay tells you how much in between spoken sentences you want it to actually be reducing by. So it's better to see it in action. So at this point, we saw that the peak was around 33. So I'll put this at more of a minus 32. I'll give it a little bit of buffer room. And I don't want to completely cut off the ends of words, because sometimes what you can do is accidentally cut off like the ends of words if you have the attack decay too low. So I'll actually start it at 200 and just see how it looks after that. So here are the settings that I typically use. These settings I don't change typically. The frequency I typically don't touch. The level reduction is just the maximum amount possible. And really only the two that I ever really mess with are the gate threshold and the attack decay. So I'm going to use this. We're going to see it, and boom, all that big section there is gone. This section, gone. But we still have, if we zoom out, a totally untouched section here, which is exactly what we want. So now I'll just have to do, like I said, my computer likes to have a bit of a fit if I try to do more than 5 minutes at a time for this tool for some reason. So I'm just going to do another 5 minutes here. We can zoom in and see it in action too. And all that stuff is gone, just like that. We'll see little residual things here now and again, and that's something that I typically take care of in the actual deep diving editing section. You know, that's like just a background click that when I see it, I'll highlight it and I'll use the silence tool here, or Control L. But that's something I'll be doing more often later. So I'm going to go through this quite tediously, 5 minutes at a time, and just getting rid of all of that excess noise in the background. And obviously this is not a short recording at all, so this will take a few minutes, but just hang tight. This is all part of the process. It's all part about getting that crystal clear, professional sounding editing possible. Come on, there we go. Almost done. And the editing is, I mean, the file's not as long as I remembered. I thought it was much more over an hour than it is, which is good. Okay, cool. So now all of our amplification with Murtaugh Stream is now not an issue. I'll also just make these even at the end. There we go. So we've done the background noise for Murtaugh's section. I'll do it for Kodi. Obviously, we didn't see the same type of issue we saw by amplifying on Murtaugh's stream. Kodi's stream doesn't really have those really thick bands of line everywhere. We see a little bit right here. So I'll just go ahead and listen to that just for a second, to see what the peak value is, to see if that needs to change at all. And again, this is just background noises, the things that, you know, your mic doesn't need it. Oh, there's a cat purring actually as well. Not the worst background noise to have, little cat purring. Okay, so the maximum threshold still under minus 33, so I'm going to keep the settings as they were, since it won't be an issue. So similarly, I'm just going to unceremoniously get rid of all that background noise. And again, you can see it in action. We still have some residuals in there, but that's not that big a deal. We can get it all in the second run. This is all just about getting it as clean as possible before you even have to touch it. I'm going to say that quite a few times, so unfortunately you'll have to get used to it. Alright, keep going. And for the record, no, I've never used this account for anything. I've never streamed before. This is all for you guys. Just for you. It was the easiest way I could think of saving it. Alright, keep going. Get close to the end. Alright, and then the last little bit right there. Oh, didn't need that there. There we go. Alright, so step B of do the streams have any noticeable consistent background noise? That's done. And we didn't even use the thing that I said we were going to use in the document, so we're doing great. The last thing was just checking to see if the voices are in fact in sync, making sure they line up appropriately. Obviously, things like basic talking over each other, that's just stuff that happens when people are actually having a conversation. In a podcast, you can edit it to make it sound like no one's ever actually talking over each other. Or you don't have to edit that way, and your podcast is just people talking over each other. But instances like that aren't that big of a deal. That's not really what we're looking for, because that's something that we can tweak while we're editing it. We're really just making sure that, when one person's asking a question, is the other person responding appropriately, in terms of the alignment. So let's go ahead and just pick a random section where it seems like there's a bit of exchange. So I'll just start playing it from right here and just give it a quick listen.
It was from one of the other print stumps. I don't think we ever know.
Another mid-range Bright Lord, basically, in a pointless skirmish, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it ever says who what print stump he's from.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good. There was a bit of overlap there, but it seemed more about just kind of like meandering thought process, trying to help each other get there. So let's jump ahead a little bit to a little bit more back and forth here.
And a lot of people remind Calvin of Tien.
Yeah.
Any small helpless boy.
Yeah.
And obviously all the extra background
Going back
noise
to
is exactly what we'll be taking care of.
This is
But that exchange didn't seem off at all. So let me just jump ahead again. Just want to make sure that there wasn't any issues with lag later on in the recording.
his own
as well.
thing.
Right. Do you think, Cody, I know...
Oh, yeah. I think that the mark alignment worked well. And let me just jump way towards the end. Just make sure that it's persisting and it looks good.
Just like, well, this is this is the dream I have for you. You need to fulfill this dream. And
Yeah, I think it's a combination.
Yep, I'm convinced. The mark worked fine. We don't have to worry about shifting the alignment too much. So A, B, C, tick, tick, tick. Those are the first kind of things that I'll check through, and they're all good now. So now I can actually get to the real editing part. And this is kind of the hardest part for me to actually document. This is where a bit of the quote-unquote creativity comes in, where just kind of the instinct comes in. The next kind of step that I'm going to do that I don't think I can do 100% of tonight, I might, who knows. I'm going to be doing this anyway, but I don't typically narrate while I'm editing. But once you've done, A, B, and C that I've mentioned here, the next step is to just listen through to the entire recording at that point. You've cleaned up the audio, to a basic degree to where it should be quote unquote listenable. The volume level should be good. The background noise should be minimal. There'll still be things to clean up. But this is typically where I'll listen through and from start to finish, you can take notes, you can just make mental notes, you could have a notepad open in your phone, you can export this file, this unfinished file, you can always just export this as an MP3, put it at like the most basic standard quality to keep the file size low. You can export that, load it up to a Dropbox or a Google Drive, listen to it on your phone, whatever works for you. That's something I do sometimes, is I'll just export it and listen to it while I'm doing other things anyway. So that's why the biggest step next is just to know what the actual full audio contains. And, like I said, physically take notes if you like, but we're not really trying to edit at this point. You can listen and edit at the same time for the first time. I'll do that if I'm in a rush, but to really kind of get a good sense of how to actually edit the podcast episode, it really is best to listen to it in full without making any major edits. You're going to want to, which is why I mentioned the exporting it and loading it to your phone, because that physically prevents you. But for the sake of this, we're just going to listen to it on here for as much as we can. And I'm going to have to contain myself not to jump ahead like I typically would. But while you're listening through the first thing, listening through for the first time, here are just kind of some certain things to keep an eye out for. Mentally or physically take note of key moments such as the read in or the read out. Those are two things that we're seeing consistently for every episode. So that's just something to kind of make a note of in your head, or again, physically. Make a note of, new topics of conversation that are deliberate. This is someone saying something like, let's talk about this, or let's move on to this portion or this topic or something like that. That's a deliberate shift in conversation. It's a very clear indication of maybe the conversation got off track, or you've kind of reached the as far as you can go with a certain idea. It's a good kind of marker from an editing sense of a beat of the episode, and we'll get into that, what that is in a little bit. Similarly, for new topics of conversation, there are also organic new conversations, and this is stuff that comes up on topic just from talking about other things, natural, organic conversation. And this stuff is really important because this is what I feel like people are most interested in, is the organic conversation and seeing kind of what sprouts from the deliberate and then forms into organic. So I emphasize on topic because there's plenty of organic off-topic conversations. With the nature of this, we're so excited we're going to have things to talk about that are, tangentially related, but they're not really on the topic of what the episode should be about. And these are things that, I cut out with extreme prejudice when I'm editing. When we meander for too long, or we talk to each other for too long about, something that happens in 3 books from now, and the impacts that it has, and it has no relevance realistically to what's physically in the chapters that we're covering. Those are the things that we end up cutting more often than not. But organic, on-topic conversation is really important, and is one of the things that I try to make sure I cut out as little as possible. Along that same vein is on-topic theories, and that's something that is a lot of fun in these episodes, is the chance to, while we're actively discussing the chapter, naturally theories are going to spring up, and they might be something that you've thought for a while, a headcanon or whatever, but typically speaking, if there's a good discussion about a theory, it's going to stay in. If it's just kind of a throwaway line like, oh, I've always wondered if this is the case, and it's, again, tangentially at best related, that's probably going to get cut. But if it's a genuine, exploration of an idea you have, a theory, whatever, that's something to make note of and as something to keep. Another thing to keep an eye out for are non-intro or outro readings. They kind of pop up throughout recording sessions when someone has a relevant passage to read, or if it's, relates to a topic or whatever. These don't always make it in. I try not to have too much book reading, and when I do, I try to make sure it's, distinct and set up so that you can tell that it's not just conversation, it's the book happening. So it's something to keep an eye out for. You don't want to have too much reading in the podcast because, again, they can listen to the audiobook. They can pick up the book themselves. But having relevant passages as kind of a conversation bridge, totally fine, and they don't have to necessarily be cut. But it's just something to keep an eye out for. One thing I didn't note here, but I will add just for my own sanity, Another thing I typically mark out are the the actual intro outros that are spoken. You know, the welcome to Return to Roshar or thank you for listening. I make note of that specifically what sections those are in because I used the raw audio from the recording to make the new theme songs, and I use the same words as well for the outro as well. So it's something that will break out, you know, physically from the recordings at some point. I always turn it into an actual audio file on its own. But that's not something I anticipate having to be passed off to any of you guys. It's something I'll probably maintain just because I'm pretty familiar with it. So then, actual podcast intro. Outro. Okay. So those are the big moments the big things to kind of keep an eye out for. Again, physically take notes if you want to, mentally take notes if that works for you. Do whatever works. And then again, I've touched on this a little bit already, but take note of off-topic conversations, whether it's, you know, a tangent that is still, you know, Stormlight related, but it's wildly off topic in terms of the contents of the chapter. That's something that's probably going to go. If it's something completely off topic, you know, not even about the books, it's almost certainly going to go, unless it has a specific tie-in to a relevant conversation. Like if an offhand comment that isn't on topic leads to an organic conversation, it might make it, it might not. And it also, another thing I keep into account is humor. You know, if it's a funny little anecdote that doesn't take away from the podcast, it doesn't distract, and it makes the conversation flow, there's always going to be a place for that kind of stuff. But it is important for me when I edit to try to keep things on topic and concise and to flow as well as possible to make it as listenable as possible. So things like, you know, off-topic conversation and tangents, throwaway lines or non-sequiturs, ums and uhs, those are always going to be cut out. But by throwaway lines, I mean like everyone does it. I find myself doing it in recordings, but you'll just sometimes say something and no one will respond, and you've said it in a way that you didn't expect anyone to respond to. It's just kind of a statement, and obviously for everyone's sake in terms of the cringe factor, but also just for the sake of the podcast, those types of things will get cut out too. And if I find any in this specific recording, I'll make note of it, but just something to keep an eye out for. It's, again, everyone's guilty of it. I find myself saying it sometimes, as terrible as that is for me to edit. But again, it's just one of those things that happens in regular conversations, but now that we're listening back in an audio format, we can have the luxury of removing it. So with these two B's and C's in mind, you know, taking notes of key moments that you want to keep versus ones that will probably get cut. Once you've completed the first listen through, you know, the first hour, you know, obviously it's an hour long. So, you know, that's about how much time you'll have to dedicate to the first listen, or however long the recording is in this case. But once you've done that, whether you've written your notes down or mentally organized your thoughts, if you're so capable, try to get an idea for what the flow of the episode will be like and what the major beats of the episode will be. And when I said beat earlier, this is what I was referring to. A beat would be anything that you would title a section of audio if you were making an outline. So like, this is the section where we discuss the start of the chapter, or this is the section where we dive into, you know, some of the subtext for this section, or this is the section where we have the read-in or the readout. You know, that'll be a quote-unquote beat. So it's anything that, if separated from the podcast, could be its own self-contained conversation in a sense. So those are things that you kind of want to look out for. And in this little paragraph here, I talk about how with the magic of editing, quote unquote, you can have a conversation that is 45 minutes long. And let's say the first 5 minutes is this really, really awesome on-topic conversation. And then at the end of that 5 minutes, you know, naturally the conversation leads to something else. And then there's other topics in between and then there. And then maybe 30 minutes later, long after you've had that first 5-minute conversation, the conversation loops back and you actually continue having that first conversation. those are two things that you can just combine together. Just because it happened originally in recording, just because they didn't happen right next to each other, doesn't mean we can't make them happen next to each other in the final product. So, if this section of audio right here was one conversation and it could technically continue over here too, in the end product, those two sections will be side by side. That's kind of one of the main things I try to go for is if you have these conversations that do actually flow and they do continue, but there's just a bit of, a side conversation or further exploration in the middle, you could combine those two sections. No one's ever going to know the difference. No one outside of you, generally speaking, is going to listen to the raw audio file. No one knows how it originally sounded. So if you have a 2-minute conversation at the beginning and a 3-minute conversation at the end, that when you combine them, it makes a complete 5 minutes. Perfect. That's 5 minutes of content right there. So, don't be afraid to Frankenstein the audio a little bit so that it makes a bit more sense. Obviously, it's still more or less organic in the terms of the flow, but it just makes more sense logically to have those sections of the conversation next to each other. So that's kind of what this little paragraph describes, a section like that. So that's where the creative and kind of gut feeling comes into play, where no one's going to tell you to combine those two conversation topics. And, maybe it makes sense to leave it organically at the beginning and then at the end to bookend. That's totally possible as well. So either scenario is just as likely of an outcome. So you get to make that call as the editor. Is this conversation going to stay separated like that, or can I combine it in a better way that makes more sense? So that's everything I've written here so far. After you finish your notes, you're ready to dive into the actual editing. And again, that's, the slightly more monotonous side of things, going through and finding these little blips of noise that weren't taken care of by the noise gate and using the silence tool. That's when we kind of start doing that stuff. So I'll take a quick pause. I do see that I've got 2 people watching, which is, more people than I've ever had watching here because I've never streamed before. But if there are any questions, of the stuff that we've kind of talked about, it's very technical, very kind of broad. Happy to take questions, happy to discuss any of these particular topics a little bit more in depth. But otherwise, I might just physically, just start editing. I probably won't talk too much in that part because, there's not really much to say if I'm just going through and silencing clicks or whatever, if I'm just going through oh, here's some extraneous noise. There we go, it's gone. There's not much to say there without continuing to dry out my mouth, but I'm seeing no comments, which is fine by me. So I will just start editing. And again, I haven't actually listened to this yet. And I'm going to break my own rules a little bit. And I'll probably do a bit of cheeky edits, but it's more about just kind of breaking it up. So all of this before here was the mark. I think that I'll leave the mixer for the audio slightly up. So many apologies if you're in this episode and you're listening. But
Mark.
Okay, so there's the mark.
Welcome.
And there's Cody starting the intro. So all of this noise, gone. So the function I'm using there, just as a reminder again, it's the silence tool. I used the hotkey Control L. I'm just hunting out those little tiny fragments of audio. Just see here.
Book published.
Yeah, that's just the end of the K, so that's not something we want to get rid of.
Context.
Yep, that's so good. Okay. And that's what I was saying earlier about, not trying to have the noise gate up too high or too low, because you don't want to cut off the end of words like that,
Context.
Context, if we had the noise get up to right there, it might just be like conte. And I'm going to pretend like I've already listened through this for the first hour like I normally would, just for the sake of kind of demonstrating what the next step might be when you're actually editing a little bit. And I'm not even going to do much editing in terms of removing ums or anything like that. I'm just going to use the same thing I used before with the mark, Control I. I'm just going to create a split right here. And all this is telling me is that this section is where Cody does the read-in. You know, this is where he reads the intro, not the read-in, the intro.
My name is Cody.
So I actually made it too big there. Because this section is what I use for the theme song.
Welcome to Return to Roshar.
And Cody does not have his own version of the theme song yet, so I will absolutely be using this to make the new theme song. So now I know that this is where the theme song starts and ends, where I have to use that audio.
Welcome.
And then that means that the actual introductions start here.
My name is Cody.
There's a little there, but again.
My name is
do the
Cody,
us later.
and with me today is Murtagh, and we will be going over Chapter 1 with you today.
All right, so let's just
My name is Cody. And
keep going.
Hi,
I'm
this
so
is
tempted
Murtagh.
to just start cleaning it up, but I'm showing a lot of restraint right here. But what I will do is I'll chop out unnecessary silences. And that's something that you're going to do a lot. A lot of the editing aspect is just taking out silences, right? Like that. Silences that go on for too long. Making it all nice and tight.
My name is Cody, and with me today is Murtagh, and we will be going over Chapter 1 with you today.
And that sounds much nicer. Okay.
Hi, this is Murtagh. Chapter 1, Stormblast.
Okay. So already we're stopping again because same thing, making a split because right here is where the read-in starts. No.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1, making a split right there. So now I'm not going to listen to all of this exactly. I'm not going to listen to the entire
Dried
read-in.
horses, they're
I'm going to find where the read-in starts and ends.
You're in Kaladin Stormblast squad. The other soldiers nearby nodded in agreement.
It sounds like that's where it ends. So let me just get rid of all this background noise here. And now I can just create another clean split. So now if we zoom back out, we've got 3 sections already identified. We've got the part that's going to go for the intro song, you know, the actual introduction from Cody and Murtagh, and then this whole section of the read-in. So everything after this point is conversation. So we can go ahead and remove some extra silence there.
Ordinary men don't kill Shardbearer.
You're damn right,
Until
Cody.
about 15 minutes from now.
Get rid of that background noise. Extraneous. Another click. Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean that's just I suppose that was a long reading for a chapter, but Sen is an important character that you get to know for a very small time, at least a Kaladin who speaks a sentence to him and remembers him for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Good. That all sounds nice and tight. Very well spoken, Murtagh.
So basically in this chapter, we've got Sen, obviously, small, terrified soldier that Kaladin has recently bought into his squad.
We've got another long silence here. Get rid of that extra extraneous stuff. Just bring it in tight.
They're preparing for a skirmish with, was it Hala? I believe is how you pronounce that, if I remember.
Alright, so just get this out. And you'll notice one thing I'm doing every time I'm deleting. So that's, you know, when I'm highlighting here and removing the silence here, I'm using the literal delete key. You want to make sure that whenever you're doing this, no matter how many streams you have, you're highlighting all of them. Because if I were to just say, just delete this section, it'll move Cody's audio, but it won't move Murtagh's audio, so now it's all out of sync. So if you're making a delete, make sure you have all of the audio streams selected. Just a little pro tip there. So let's tighten this up and see how this sentence flows now.
They're preparing for a skirmish with Hala, I believe is how you pronounce that if I'm remembering correctly.
Get rid of that.
Who is from one of the other princedoms. I don't think we ever know.
Another mid-range Bright Lord, basically.
So this is a little section where we can kind of demonstrate how there's like a minor overlap where, you know, Cody's sentence ends and Murtaugh's start. If we've got like a single sentence, end of a sentence like that, you can highlight it and use Control X or cut, just like you would with a Word document. Move the cursor over and paste it. And this preserves, you know, the alignment. It means that, you know, we can move this over without having to worry about, you know, them being out of alignment again using a delete tool. And then we just tighten that up a little bit more. So you can listen to that again.
Ever know.
Another mid-range Bright Lord, basically, in a pointless skirmish, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it ever says.
We've got a little bit of background noise here we're just going to get rid of. And then
Yeah.
that's a yeah, that's not a background noise. We'll just tighten that up too. Get rid of this. And just make that closer.
Yeah. I don't think it ever says who he, like what princedom he's from. Like what princedom he's from. If he is just also another Sadeas underling or not. Or not. Not.
Okay, so it's just a knot.
But
Yeah,
Don't need that but there. And then we'll just tighten this up over here.
I believe it's deliberately left out. I mean,
Mhm.
that's kind of emphasizes the point that it doesn't really matter.
And that's a, you know, that's a crossover example where it makes sense. You know, Murtaugh is talking, Cody agrees. He has a little you leave it right there. Get rid of that background. Tighten up.
yeah, but the info we get is it's on the borders of the Sadeas princedom. So
Dead air.
uh,
There's an Gonna cut that one just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's a big noise. And we're just gonna get rid of that right now.
I don't know who borders Sadeas by heart. I don't have a map in front of me.
Murtaugh, what are you playing with back there? Jeez, just making clinky clackies. Let's see if that needs to stay.
yeah, I don't know. Have they furnished a map of Kolinar with the?
He is playing with a bottle of water or something. Which, I mean, good for him. Reduce, reuse. That sounds like a metal bottle. Won't fault him for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who borders Sadeas by heart.
Yeah, I don't think this needs to stay in. We can just cut that out. It has a lot of background noise anyway, so it'll make more sense if this flows like this.
Princedom. So yeah, I don't know. Have they furnished a map of Kolinar with the princedoms marked out? I'm not sure if I've ever seen one.
Yes, I've seen them before.
Okay.
Yes, I've seen them before.
Got a lot of extra noise there.
Yes, I've seen them before.
Yeah, see, that doesn't work because the cutoff is there. Let me just see where this...
Princedom. So yeah, I don't know. Have they?
I don't know if we even need a sentence at all, because, you know, we don't need them asking and confirming if something exists. We can just accept it as it is. So let's just take that out and see what happens next.
So yeah, we have a boy.
Oh, man, let's get all this out of here. What is going on here? Yep, that's more. Now this is, you know, this is not atypical. This is just run-of-the-mill standard audio stuff. You know, no one really thinks about what's going on in their background while they're recording. They're just, you know, trying to have a good chat in the moment. So I won't fault them. Happens just as much in my own audio. So let's pick this up from here and see.
So yeah, we have an
extra so.
So
Get that out of here.
So yeah, we have a boy here in
An extra A there.
A boy here in 15. So in many ways, this is, as we'll see later, a foreshadowing of.
Cut this out. You can, chop out an in here now and then if they interact with the silence. So won't slow myself down
Later,
too
a
much at this point. We're going
foreshadowing
full steam
of-
ahead. I'm actually getting some work done here.
What Kaladin's first experience was.
Let me get back to that. Just get that little.
Shadowing of what Kaladin's
Yep, that needs to be tightened here.
what Kaladin's first experience was like, and
Yeah.
so we kind of
There's an affirmative yep. So we're just gonna take this, cut it, paste it, and then get rid of the dead air.
can get some. We don't see it right away, but later on we'll see that this is a contrasting to.
Get rid of that. Tighten, and this is genuinely how I do it. Now that I can run a little bit full speed for myself, I'll kind of go through it and edit it as I'm listening through it like this.
We don't see it right away, but later on we'll see that this is a contrasting to from Kaladin's start to where Kaladin is 3 years later and joining the army.
Tighten this up a little bit.
This is 3 years of him being in Amaram's army. And he's
Okay. Get rid of that background noise as well. Get rid of all this dead air.
Amaram's army. And he's made it to squad leader and recognized as the best. Recognized as the best.
Cool.
Yeah, it doesn't take him long. He's a natural fighter.
Damn right. Cool.
He's lucky. He's Stormblast.
The bass on Murtaugh's voice in this recording is quite high.
One thing I thought was interesting, one thing
Can get that out of there.
one thing I thought was interesting, we learn later, how Kaladin started.
Okay, so this sounds like it might be the start of a tangent, so I'm just going to make a mental note of this by making a physical note as well. And we're just going to just leave it here. If we don't need it to stay, we can always just click on it to get rid of it. But this is, potential tangent.
Yeah, it doesn't take him long. He's a natural fighter. He's lucky. He's Stormblast. One thing I thought was interesting, we learn later, how Kaladin thinks of the kit that Amaram's army is outfitted in these antiquated leather, like almost like cuirasses and skirts that are supposed to look like honorable. It's this image that Amaram likes to uphold of himself, but they're pretty useless. Well, and when Kaladin walks in, he's got a pair of pants on under his skirt. Like I need some more things on my legs. He's just totally utilitarian compared to him.
He needs pockets.
Okay, so that might have some relevance. Let me just keep listening and see if it loops back around.
Yeah, well, chapter moves on.
See, so if you notice, this is kind of an aside, has some relevance, but might be slightly straying, and you'll notice even at the end of the conversation how it just kind of fizzles, and then there's a reset. There's a deliberate new conversation started, as I was saying before. So I'm not going to remove this, but I will mark it out with I'm going to keep the mark I made earlier and just have this section broken out like this, so that when I'm going through the next time, I'm considering this the first time I'm listening to it, quote unquote. So the next time I go through, after I've listened to everything else, and I can evaluate whether this conversation is actually relevant to what the overall podcast should end up being, I will either cut it at that point or I'll leave it in. But this is just kind of a good way of making a note to yourself of, here's a potential tangent. Here's a potential, what is this? Almost a minute of audio that can get removed. And, obviously it doesn't feel like a lot, but, again, we're starting with over an hour of audio, and by the end of this, it will likely be between 25 to 30 minutes. So, those minutes add up, and they got to come from somewhere. So, again, not making any call to definitely remove this because, again, it might actually be relevant to further points that are made. But in the end, if it doesn't fit in with any of the quote-unquote beats, it'll get cut. But we'll leave that decision for later.
Chapter moves on. It's just Sen being terrified, wondering why anyone would pay to get him. Dalit says something like, "Oh yeah, I think you guys all remind him of someone." And obviously, we know.
Okay, so this is actually relevant. So we're gonna keep going here. I'm still gonna do my little bit cleanups. I kind of skipped doing that over here, but I also don't like to waste too much time cleaning up sections that might get cut. Obviously, that's hard to do if you're actively editing, as I have been along the way. But try not to waste too much time cleaning up sections of audio that might end up just being cut, because that's just time wasted. So
Remind him of someone. And obviously, we know he's thinking of Tien. A lot of people remind Kaladin of Tien.
Yeah.
Any small helpless boy.
there's a little there. Leave that in.
Boy.
A little bit of extra background noise there at the end, though.
Helpless boy.
Helpless boy.
Yeah. Going back to the
Chop this over here.
this is a fight against Hala. It was a fight against Hala, which was the third fight Kaladin was in, that Tien dies. And so a bit later on in the chapter, when they see the officer, and Kaladin says that's one of Hala's officers, he might be the one. He is specifically, the last 3 years, been hunting for the officer of Hala that killed Tien in front of him. So he's keyed in here. He's like, this might be the one. He's a little obsessed.
This is all relevant.
Dalit's trying to calm him down. Be like, it's an officer. Your odds are low. It's the one. Like Kaladin's like, nope, we're going for it.
Right. Yeah, I almost overlooked that. There is a revenge appetite there.
He gets the job done.
Obviously, I didn't do this throughout there because I wanted to kind of hear where that line of thinking was going. So I'll go back and clean up the rest of that in a little bit, but I want to see how long this kind of conversation topic goes on for.
But so you see this as part of his obsession with this. He's learned Hela strategies. He understands how he works, so he's prepared to dodge the volley arrows. We see him commenting a couple different points on his strategy, and that's part of why he's able to so well predict this battle and know where to move, as he's intimately familiar with their opponent.
Okay, let's see where this goes.
Right.
Right. Also, it's no accident that I'm starting this on an episode where I don't have to listen to my own voice. I don't have that big an issue listening to my own voice on recording, as evidenced by me editing these podcasts, but it can be a little tough sometimes. So,
Third time.
What does that say?
Right. Third time.
Their opponent.
Right.
Don't need that. More background noise.
Chapter.
Oops. There we go.
Although you also do see a little bit here, which, granted, the lines have fallen into complete chaos almost as soon as both charges start. But you do also catch hints of while Kaladin can be very smart in battle and he can be tactically smart, when it comes to protecting his own men and meeting his own objectives, he can overlook the needs of the army to a degree. So like, his group immediately rushes out, does something completely different than everyone else. It's just he's like, I'm gonna.
Relevant tangent warning. On topic, associates with the chapter, slightly goes ahead towards, Parshendi actual bridge running scenes, but connects with some of the message that we're seeing here. So I will probably make a little make a little mark at some point, but I'm just going to let this see how long this goes for.
Rushes out, does something completely different than everyone else. It's just he's like, I'm gonna do what it takes for my men to survive and for us to get elevated. And in this case, it doesn't really have much consequence because the whole battlefield is just pure chaos, and it's just two Bright Lords letting their peons stab each other to death and don't really care. It's kind of meaningless battle, but you see those hints of he does his own thing.
Right.
All right. Let's see how Murtaugh responds.
Right. Do you think, Cody, like, I know that Kaladin's going in an effort to protect and possibly revenge when he sees the officer in that, but they're trained. Do you think there's an element to the thrill being involved in how quickly supposedly these Alethi soldiers just disperse and go in a mad, chaotic
Good
melee?
question. Very good
Potentially. But I also think a lot of it comes down to these are not very well trained men. Like they're not trying, they're not, as they put it, all the good soldiers are in the Shattered Plains. These are the dregs.
The rabble.
That aren't good enough to do that. And,
Right.
as we see with Tien and Kaladin, they'll throw. If you can hold a spear, they'll chuck you out there and expect you to go die honorably.
All right, let's see if this is the
Right.
end.
Good point. Throughout here, I don't know. I'm just moving through the chapter.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Murtaugh, for that. So that, again, perfect thing to look out for is just, it's not a bad thing that this kind of things happens. It really helps with editing that you have these moments where naturally conversations just hit a lull. You reach the end of a topic and your brain doesn't instantly have a new, response to that. It's okay to just move on. And that also helps me because now I can say that this section right here from, here to here.
Chapter moves on. It's just
From, oops, that's not what I want. So a section here from, 5:52, 5 minutes 52 seconds, all the way till, right about 9 minutes 27 seconds. That's one big section of on topic, exploratory conversation. This is something we definitely want to keep in the podcast. It has back and forth between the hosts. It has relevant information that goes a little bit into the subtext of the chapter. And again, that's 3 minutes and 34 seconds. It will get tightened up as well. I'll have some ums and uhs to clean out of there. But this is a section that I will likely want to keep. So again, just going to keep calling those things out as I do them. But just perfect kind of segue there for a moment of conversation.
throughout here, I don't know. I'm just moving through the chapter. After the mad dash, Kaladin's group engages a lot of groups that are bigger than his, and it just works because of their training and formations. You see the first signs of Kaladin's surgeon background, because almost all of his squad is able to bandage themselves after taking wounds. I mean, how often can a soldier do that? But just all
Not
around,
often
basically
enough.
showing Kaladin off the bat to be, I don't know, a badass without any. I don't know, a badass without any flaws yet. Chapter 1, here you go. Here's Kaladin's
Yeah, that's
Stormblast.
true. That's true. You got to get the good boy, the golden boy kind of perspective. Can do no harm, do no wrong. Just do a quick little cleanup here, and then let's see how Cody responds to Murtaugh's musings.
Man of music using the beating of his shield to direct his squad, elaborate signals, and that shows that he trains them very well, trains them hard, and will
Just tighten this up, make it flow a little bit nicer. And that's not to say that there shouldn't be any silence in between, sentences or whatever. Naturally, there should be a bit of a pause, but trust me, it just sounds a bit nicer when those disjointed thoughts make a complete sentence.
man of music using the beating of his shield to direct his squad, elaborate signals, and that shows that he trains them very well, trains them hard, and we'll see this be a reoccurring theme as he builds Bridge 4 later on,
Yeah, we don't need that, but this, that. We'll just go ahead and jump ahead here.
He's
Ooh, we don't need that.
He's a leader, and he's still willing to be one at this point.
Tighten here. Tighten here.
I think a lot of the times, with Windrunners, a lot of the focus gets thrown on that they are, they're protectors and stuff, but Jezrien was also, leadership. He was considered the greatest leader.
We're getting a bit of a tangent about Windrunners, but again, not gonna throw it out with the bathwater yet. This could be something worth keeping, so we'll tighten it up in anticipation of it being something that's kept, but keep it out for the end of this section.
But Jezrien
Bring that closer.
Jezrien was also, leadership. He was considered the greatest leader, and that's why he was king of the heralds, because he came to teach leadership. That was a skill Jezrien would teach. And so you see Kaladin not only is a protector, he is a leader, and he wants to teach others to be good leaders and instill good leadership quality. So he's the bona fide all-around package.
He's not wrong. Just clean that up. Get rid of those clicks and clanks and clunks. Definitely, you're damn straight. Alright, let's see if this is the end of that conversation.
So they stack up on this hill and
Alright, so this sounds like they go back into the actual description of the chapter. So again, not saying that this section about how Kaladin's actions relate to being a Windrunner, Jezrien, and all that stuff, not saying that won't stay, but we're marking that off right there. So now after that other section, we've got another 2-minute section that may or may not be making the final cut. But that's fine. Keep moving.
so they stack up on this hill and defend it for about an hour, I believe. And then things start to fall apart, and because they've been doing so well, Sen realizes suddenly that it's fallen apart around them and that this battle is being lost where they are. So they start the retreat towards another group of Imram's soldiers, and
So this will likely be relevant and kept, so I'll just go ahead and tighten that up real quick. I hope this is even moderately useful. At the very least, it is getting me to actually do this right now. So, that's progress towards meeting the release date of the
it's fallen
20th,
apart
which
around them,
obviously
and
in
that
4
this battle
days.
is
I lost
being
my
lost where they are.
lost my buffer time window quite a bit after a bit, just the natural cycle of things. But that's why you guys are here, to learn about this so that it's not just me and we can get back ahead of the game again.
Being lost where they are, so they start the retreat towards another group of Amaram's soldiers, and it's at this point Sen gets separated from the rest of the group in the chaos, and he kind of panics and blindly runs towards.
Just zoom back out a little bit. Yeah, just gotta type that here. Get rid of that.
He runs towards the first Alethi he thinks he sees, which
Damn, Murtaugh, why you clicking back there, man? Jeez.
spoiler, everyone here is an Alethi, so it doesn't work out very well for him.
See, this is a funny little moment where we got a little Murtaugh chuckle here. It's kind of lost in the audio, so we can just bump it here, and it sounds like he's actually laughing at the joke, which he is, but now it actually sounds like it.
So it doesn't work out very well for him.
Yes.
You can move the laughs around, No one has to know. Well, I mean, you guys know right now, but like, this is the uncut, Kevin commentary version of the podcast that no one's ever going to listen to. It's like the director's cut. I'm not the director, but
Getting a call. Quite lovely.
oh. So Cody's literally getting a phone call right here. So let's make a little break right here. Actually, we won't even. Yeah, we'll leave it there. We'll just see how long that break lasts for.
Yeah. Sen is separated and is, I guess you say, cornered by.
All right, so Murtaugh goes on with the show. Proud of him. That is the right call. So let's go ahead and delete that, and we can get rid of this marker because the phone interlude was not as big a deal as I thought it would be.
Yes. Sen is separated and is, I guess you say, cornered by 6 other spearmen. And Kaladin saves him from that, which is kind of ridiculous, but I guess that's another sign of how untrained these spearmen are.
It is a little bit ridiculous, but, he's got the plot armor.
And I've been puzzling over this.
Oh, so puzzling. That's a good trigger word for potential theory time.
I've been puzzling over this in my reading and preparing for this. So Kaladin, another way he bucks the system is he has a spear that's a little bit longer than everyone else's, so he can use it a little more like a.
All right. So it is. This is officially theory / possible tangent time, but it sounds relevant. So we're gonna make a little split right here.
Longer than everyone else's, so he can use it a little more like a quarterstaff. But he has 2 throwing knives in sheaths on the haft of his spear, and I'm trying to figure out how this works, where they can stay in there well enough that he can swing the spear around and like do stabby stuff, but not like so secure that when he needs to quickly grab one and throw it at someone, it's not like a pain in the butt.
Okay. So before I even let this continue, this is a example of a potential kind of veering slightly off the course, theory. I think that this is probably something that might get left in anyway because it has a slightly humorous undertone to it, and I always like to leave that kind of stuff in, make it funny as well as informative and enjoyable. So it's not like a huge, it's not a groundbreaking theory, and it's not like anything that's gonna rock the world, but it's just as simple as how does he keep his knives on his spear like that? And let's see how Murtaugh responds.
Yeah, I have a hard time picturing that too, but I'm sure there's someone out there that'd be like, well, clearly the strap is right here and it's right where he holds his hand. I don't know, but
so in their eyes, we've got never even made a spear before. We got a spear here, We got triangle point of a spear. That's obviously a spear. I've never seen a spear now. Why would I do that and not put it at the other end? What the heck is wrong with me? There we go. Easily. So we got spear. Got knife here. Somehow strapped to here. Yeah, I agree. That is kind of funky. And this is something I would probably do while I was editing. So you're just getting this for real. You know, I'm not gonna filter this for you. But if someone has something like that I can't visualize, I'm gonna draw it out. And I agree. I don't really know how he's got a couple of bad boy daggers. I mean, I guess a strap is probably enough, or whatever. But whatever. Let's see how they go.
Yeah, we get our first look of Kaladin in full action. And
Okay, so before I continue again, that was a start and end to that topic of conversation. Again, that's not a crazy amount of time. I'm gonna just add a track here, just for the sake of highlighting. Makes it a little bit easier. So this section here is, less than a minute long. It's musing about knives on a spear. Is that something that's it's relevant? Sure. Is it, earth-shattering? Not really. Is it fun? Sure. It's probably going to stay. I'm going to leave it there. Again, I wasn't going to remove it anyway, but I'm just trying to give as many examples as I can of it's a small little theory. They joke around about it for a little bit and they move on.
yeah, we get our first look of Kaladin in full action. And when Kaladin,
I'm just.
Oh, see, there we go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about this action is one person can't fight 6 people and win.
Okay. So they are continuing on with the conversation. So let's go ahead and just get rid of this bumbling into each other as they're both waiting for each other to start talking and just let the conversation continue.
our first look of Kaladin in full action. And
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about this action is one person can't fight 6 people and win unless they're. I mean, I don't see a situation where that can happen with spears and stuff. But obviously, I'm not fighting people hand to hand with edged weapons. But it just seems unrealistic, and they must be terrified and badly trained.
yeah, well, and I'm sure Kaladin's also bringing a level of confidence and aggression to it that would work.
Unrealistic in a magical story, but there's no magic.
So what does Cody say on that one little line right there? Pardon the noise on my own end. See, this is what I mean. It happens to all of us. Just move this ahead here. See what he says there.
Yeah, would working.
Unrealistic in a
Yeah, let's just get rid of those words. They're excess.
unrealistic in a magical story, but there's no magic yet.
I'm gonna read this line here from Sen's perspective here.
See, look, they're giving me everything. They're giving me every single example I could possibly think of. Perfect of a middle of the podcast read-in section. So I just go ahead and go back over here.
When had Kaladin grabbed the knife?
All right, so I'm just going to make a little split here because it signifies to me that this is a middle of the podcast read section.
The wind itself become visible.
Yeah.
He has this moment, and then a warping of the air, like the wind itself, become visible.
Okay, so that's the full read section. So again, as I have been this whole time. Sorry about that minor blip there for a second. Was just adjusting my stream settings. Okay, show will go on. All right, so this is where the reading stops.
Yeah.
He has this moment, and then he has this moment.
Got a yeah, and then we let Cody talk.
He has this moment, and then he dismisses it as he's losing too much blood, and he's just imagining things.
It's good imagery.
But yeah, here we see why Kaladin wears pants. Here we see why Kaladin wears pants, where he goes to bandage Sen's stabbed leg, and he has bandages in his pockets. So I like to imagine he doesn't just have pants; he's got like cargo pants. He's got pockets all the way down.
It's another goofy line. Cody was on this day. He was definitely very, very quippy, which I will not fault, because there's definitely a home for quippiness in a podcast about a Brandon Sanderson book, the king of quippy himself.
Yeah, some thick pants. Well, there's a lot of sharp things around. It's not just pockets.
Get rid of that dead air.
So then we finally reach where he sees the officer.
Alright, so that's the end of that minor discussion points. This is kind of when they start moving back on. It's just going to mark that off.
So then we finally reach where he sees the officer, and Sen mistakes him for a shard bearer, being a sheltered shepherd, seeing someone in full fancy armor for the first time.
Yeah. Which is surely impressive itself. Yeah.
So we got a lot of dead air here. Don't actually need this.
And Sen mistake.
Go back and tighten this up.
Being a
For the one person who's still there.
sheltered shepherd,
You're incredible.
seeing someone in full fancy armor for the first time.
Yeah. Which is surely impressive itself. Yeah.
So Kaladin's, I think, honestly fueled by revenge, but
Okay, so now they're talking back about the revenge stuff. So they describe the officer a little bit. They describe how Sen thinks of the officer. And then they go back to talking about Kaladin's little bit of revenge. So
Kaladin's, I think, honestly fueled by revenge, but is trying to convince himself that, it's also, that we kill this guy, we'll finally get that promotion. Senpai will notice me, and
like I said, Cody was king of the quips that day. In the end, I'll have a quip count for how many quips are allowed.
me, and we'll make it big. They'll get to go to a war camp with discipline and Light Eyes with integrity. A place where the fight will mean something.
Professional soldiery. Yeah. The big leagues.
they raise the red streamer to summon the wounded carriers, the runners, which we see here once again that Kaladin pretty much spends all of his money bribing people to protect his men. They raise the red streamer to summon the wounded carriers.
Tighten that up. I got distracted. Wasn't even listening.
Carriers, the runners. Which we see here once again that Kaladin pretty much spends all of his money bribing people to protect his men, whether to get them off the battlefield sooner, to get them priority with the medics, to get medical supplies, to buy boys like Sen.
All right, let's get this description stuff tightened up here.
He's very selfless with his money.
He really is. Let's see how Murtaugh responds.
Yeah, of course. He's still he's always part surgeon. He's still he's always part surgeon.
All right, looks like we got a good chunk of dead air here. Let's see how much this turns into.
Yeah, I think you all remind him of someone. Yeah, I think so too.
Like Sen, he's very selfless with his.
Just go back a little bit, see how that ties into this conversation.
They raise the red stream.
Nope.
They'll get to go to a war camp with this.
All right, so they're talking about the discipline there.
Which spends all of his money bribing people to protect his men, whether to get them off the battlefield sooner, to get them priority. We see here wounded carriers.
Okay, so in this bit of section, Cody's talking about how he has the bribes to get them seen to sooner, and then
Yeah, of course. He's always part surgeon.
Yep, there's the part surgeon.
Yeah, I think you all remind him of someone. Yeah, I think so too.
It's like a partial read in a little bit.
Then we have our first view of a Shardbearer in chapter 1.
Okay, so Murtaugh's here. What he's doing is he feels that this conversation itself has kind of concluded, but he's not really sure what's next. So let's figure out when he figures out what's next.
What did you think Shardplate looked like in your? What did it look like in your mind when you first read this?
Okay, so he's asking
I've seen it bulky and like edgy. I've seen it sinuous like a snake. I've seen it all kinds of ways. And they all look good to me.
Yeah, definitely more just like fan.
Okay, so this is Tolkien textbook. They're and this is perfect. Like, it makes sense for regular conversation, of course. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this conversation in a non-podcast sense. But this is a tangent that's barely on topic in the sense that it's talking about the book, so to speak. But it might not actually be 100% relevant to the end result. So this is definitely one that from right here. So Murtaugh is just kind of musing about Shardplate and stuff. To kind of see where that conversation takes them. So if this part of the conversation stays relevant, it could make it, it might not make it.
That are very sci-fi-esque. Yeah, definitely more just like fancy, traditional kind of armor. Like, I've definitely seen some interpretations that are very sci-fi-esque.
Yeah.
But I definitely, kind of more or less like the cover of the book. Yeah, just.
Yeah, I guess that's how I looked at it first too. But when you read it described or hear it described dozens and hundreds of times, it starts to get etched in your brain how it really is more sinuous, where there's almost nothing in between pieces. It's like an armor spacesuit kind of.
When it always talks about like the smaller and smaller plates, I guess I always kind of think of like dragon scales or something, and like it's
Yeah.
got a lot of like scaly parts to it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this time
That is some kind of sound there.
Sen sees this shard bearer, and he doesn't like. He's like,
Okay, so all this is right here is that topic of what did you first think shard play looked like when you thought about it, and that right there is a not insignificant 2 minutes again. So every minute counts when you're going from an hour and 2 minutes down to 25 to 30 minutes. Or again, I don't specifically aim for that amount, but that's just kind of naturally how much is typically left from an hour's worth of audio. But again, it's not that you want to cut everything out. It's more about what's worth keeping, in the sense that it flows and it keeps the podcast itself listenable. So this whole section about what they first thought about Sharply looking like, it's valuable discussion, and it's something that's a conversation worth happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to stay in this episode.
yeah, this time Sen sees this shard bearer, and he doesn't like. He's like, man, how could I have ever thought that guy in normal armor was a shard bearer? It's just so impressive. I know.
Okay, so
Impressive. I know. We hear about it later in the book. Actually, I think it would be book 2 that we really start to hear about it, but that a lot of common soldiers die to shard bearers just by the simple fact that they've never seen it before, and it's so beautiful and awe-inspiring. They're just dumbstruck and pretty much just stand still and put up no resistance and just get taken out because it's such a thing to behold.
Yeah, I mean that is a thing. You need to be trained to even stand up and have your brain not melt.
oops.
If it's not awe, it's fear that's getting you.
And so, as he sees the shard bearer coming towards them,
This is all the same section about the shard bearer stuff with Sen and that whole fight. So this section will likely stay together.
as he sees the shard bearer coming towards them, Sen finally passes out from the blood loss from his leg wound. We reach the end of the chapter.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. Cliffhanger. Yep, that's it. Cliffhanger.
All right. So that's their end. So obviously, when this was recorded, this is known to us on the podcast end of things. But if somehow someone who isn't one of our podcast team is watching this, hey. But obviously, you guys know that we recorded it in a sense that multiple chapters are being discussed in the same episode. So that may be the end of when they finish talking about chapter 1, because the chapter physically ends there. We'll see how much they go on for. But the next chapter, in addition to that, I believe it was 15, but I won't worry about that too much. But anyway, the second chapter that's built into this episode as well, I'll figure out a way of having a transition between them or whatever, musical or otherwise, to make it flow. But if they're going to start shifting gears.
Yes, but I need to.
Yep, that's it. Cliffhanger.
And then I think this is probably where, if I remember correctly, me and Leia were both in the Skype call, listening, or Zoom call or whatever, listening just for fun while they're recording. And then we mentioned, oh, don't forget that, you're not just doing chapter 1.
Yes, but I need to take a quick break and
Okay, so there's a quick break.
call. Yeah.
All right, so there's a good break here,
Okay, because we're.
and then this is when we're talking to them.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were. How are we doing? Okay. Yeah, I need to go call my dad back real quick to discuss our work plan for tomorrow.
Yeah, you got
Okay,
it.
should we now just with
Yeah, what would be easier for you?
All right, let's find. Okay, so this is just him talking to me / Leia, so he won't even hear who he's responding to. So let's just find when Cody comes back.
One of the great mysteries.
I mean, like, also, like, could people just run at each other with spears full?
Oh, I think we were actually talking about like trying to visually imagine battles here, but again,
Have you ever listened to like hardcore history?
yeah. Okay,
No, I think I've seen.
let's find where.
Yeah, for Christmas I'm gonna ask.
All right, still
It was a good time.
fully off topic.
It was 9 o'clock
Okay, still fully off topic.
earlier tonight.
Honestly, this may sound like not ideal. I really, really like when there's a huge section of like irrelevant information in the middle, because you can just delete all that at once and you just see that time shrink. Ooh, that feels good.
Okay, so chapters 1. Oh, come back. What did you do? Come back, Zoom.
Oh yes, so yeah, so Cody, I believe, re-records his introductory statement from the beginning to include the fact that it's multiple chapters here. So let me find out where he does that.
Apparently, if you minimize Zoom, it snaps into your brow.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so chapters 1, 10. Kevin, do you want us to like do anything to signal that we're coming back in?
No, Cody, but thank you.
Today we will be discussing.
Okay. Ooh, this is gonna feel real nice. All right, we're gonna take all this. Ooh, this is gonna feel really good. Oh yeah. Look at that. 8 minutes and 44 seconds. All gone. Gone. Just done. Beautiful. Ooh, and that brings our total minutes down to 49. Oh, ooh, I love to see that. Getting closer and closer to 30. So if this is actually him re-recording that beginning section, I may actually just leave this split out.
Today we will be discussing chapters 1, Stormblessed, and chapter 10,
Chapter 10.
Stories
There we go.
of Surgeons. I am Cody, and with me today is Murtog, and we are going to start off this section where we look at Kaladin, focus on his backstory and his chapters in part 1 of The Way of Kings. So that's what we will be discussing for the next couple of weeks.
Okay, perfect. So that's him basically just re-recording the intro. You know, the original intro was what that short little snippet right here after the what will become the theme song and right before the read-in. So when I'm doing, you know, actual edits in terms of like shifting audio around and making things and Frankensteining a little bit, I'll move that new section over here and I'll get rid of that beginning section, but I'll leave it there for now, just so I don't create too much work. And also just, you know, good to just see how many different breaks we've made across the way. You know, this is all stuff that is relevant, stuff that isn't relevant, but you know, some of these sections will later be combined, they'll be moved around, but this is good progress. And again, like I said, we've already shaved it down to, you know, under 50 minutes, so we're getting really good time for this. So
I'll read us in here with the first few paragraphs. Cal stumbled into the surgery.
okay, so this is good. So this is the second read-in for chapter 10, so I can leave that split.
Cal stumbled into the surgery.
Okay, just skip ahead.
Lives, Cal's father said.
So that's start and end of read-in number 2.
In this chapter, we are looking at a flashback to Kaladin's younger days in Hearthstone when he was training to be a surgeon under his father, Liren.
What a chair squeak that was. So when I'm in the end, probably editing this all together, I'll probably put like a minor transition in between from when they talk about chapter 1 and into chapter 10. That'll probably be a good way of doing it. This is new for me too, obviously, because I haven't edited one of the Kaladin backstory episodes before now, so it's good to kind of figure out how I'm going to do that moving
In
forward.
previous initial reading, kind of even previous rereads, I've kind of just dismissed a little bit. It's like, okay, yeah, it's giving us the backstory. Okay, he was trained to be a surgeon. His dad doesn't like fighting, but there is so much character foundation work done in this chapter for not only Kaladin, but for Liren and what shapes their philosophies and date throughout the series what will be out of the window we see here into his life, like what shapes Kaladin. We see so many of those foundations in this chapter.
Yes. We see Liren's personal ideology that's rock solid and unshakable.
Oh, so you notice how when it said that personal? Yeah, that's that's this right here. That's a hard P into the mic. Just gonna do a quick little fade in. Actually, do that a little bit closer. Get that.
Personal
There we go.
ideology that's
Much
rock
softer.
solid and unshakable, that he lives his life by.
That's nice.
And then we're presented with the two main paths that Kaladin sees he could possibly follow in his life, being a surgeon or being a soldier.
Like right out the gate here, first couple sentences, we see Kaladin not liking light-eye things, and at this stage in its life, it's because it makes him stand out and not fit in. And like any kid his age, he wants to fit in and be accepted. And so, like, from the very beginning, he's kind of got a little bit of a thing against light eyes and light-eyed things because it makes him the other.
Yeah, he associates with 99% dark-eyed people.
So yeah, we have a girl, or
So it sounds like
a
they're just kind
girl,
of describing.
or young woman, 15-year-old girl, Sani, who has, I believe she fell out of a tree and has mangled her hand. And it is her free hand. So I don't know if that's better or worse in their society that if your free hand or your safe hand gets mangled. I assume it's better for the free hand.
I'd assume it'd be worse to have your free hand mangled.
I mean, I guess from like a personal productivity standpoint, yes, but I guess from like a culture like marriageability, desirability,
Yeah, it does mention later in this chapter even that her parents will not be happy with this outcome that this girl has with her mangled hand because it will be grotesque and the book's words, not mine, grotesque and unsuitable for like a good match in her life.
All right, so this is kind of a bit of a side tangent about Alethi propriety potentially.
So
So
I don't know if that's better or worse.
I'll potentially have that section, that little aside there as a
Desirability.
potential cut worthy.
So you see something that'll become a
Yep, see they move on after they have that little side conversation about it. So we'll go ahead and have this section marked off for potential
so you
deletion.
see something that'll become a central part of conflict between Kaladin's family and Lydai is this bowl of spheres that's on loan from Wistio.
Yeah, that's it. Bright Lord Wistia.
That's lighting their surgery room, lighting the operating table, so that they have solid, even light to see by. That will become a point of contention later on.
Right, they're Bromes, which is making this a fortune to any dark-eyed family, even a high-nond one.
And you can see Liren's priorities here, which to a degree conflict with Kaladin's, but so he's got this bowl of, lots of money, technically, worth, but to him, his most prized possession is his spectacles, and he guards them very closely because they live out in the middle of nowhere, and it would be very hard to get them replaced, and honestly, you gotta wonder how much they could even afford to replace or repair them if something were to happen to them.
Yeah, optometry does not have a calling.
So we see one of Liren's life principles that
I'm not sure if any of this is 100% relevant, so I'll just shop that there.
So we see one of Liren's life principles that I think we do see in Kaladin and how he assesses people is we can tell a lot about a man from how he keeps his workspace. Is it sloppy or orderly? Did he respect his tools or did he leave them casually about? And at least when it comes to his spear and his boots and his jerkin, Kaladin definitely takes that to heart. Treats his
and that
tools
becomes a big theme in this book and the next and the next. How you rate armies almost on Roshar is how nice do they look?
And we have an interaction here that is just like a great parent-child interaction that when it comes to washing of hands and it's wisdom of the heralds, it's the Kaladin's like every kid, it's like, yeah, I don't know if are you just BSing me, or are you just trying to make me wash my hands to make me wash my hands? Is there really germs? Is it really a big deal? Like every kid has those interactions with their parent where it's like, I know you tell me these things, but it's like, you're my dad. Do I really believe this? Is this really true?
Yeah, my friend said Rotspren don't care about water. Also in that whole wisdom of the heralds things they lay out, don't mix up the heralds with the lost radiance, those doomed souls.
Okay, so this section goes a little bit off. How did this start again?
So we see one of Liren's life principles that
Okay. So I'll leave this all together for now.
it's another part two where with kids, especially at that age, everything is very black and white, and it's very easy. Kids get caught up in, you know, the forces are against us, good, bad, and it's very black and white. You know, it's like, oh, the heralds, they're demons, they're evil, and you know, Lyran being wise, it's like, no, they are just men just like us that had too much power. And
So yeah, it's religion. Kids aren't too interested in sorting out the doctrine.
I remember there'd be times as when I was, you know, that age where it'd be like, oh, they disagree with them, that must mean they're the bad guys. It's like, no, they just
Yeah.
they just have a different opinion. That doesn't make them good or bad. It's
Yeah, I think Kaladin is 10 here.
yeah. Brandon does a good job writing him here.
He's got boys, I believe.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on.
Okay, so that's a natural non sequitur. New topic mentioned, so we're just gonna make a little split there. Thank you, Murtaugh.
Sani or Sani, the girl's name, is...
The others in town thought Lyran spent too much time with books and sick people, and that made him strange. They were uncomfortable around him.
It sounds like a reading section as well, so go ahead and...
very abnormal and different life for his world. People don't see abnormal and different life.
All right. Well, at that, we are about 2 hours into this stream, and we are about halfway through, the remains of this audio. There's only, 20 minutes exactly left of audio to edit in terms of like, figuring out what's worth saving, what's worth, possibly deleting. We're going to see a lot of these sections disappear in the next, round of editing, but it's midnight. It's been going for 2 hours. I'll probably call it quits here for the editing stuff, and I'll do the rest of this tomorrow night. So thanks for watching me edit this podcast for a little bit, and I'll have the VOD for this, the link for this posted for any of your others on the podcast team who decide to watch this. And again, if you're a random person who's watching this, cool, but also like I don't know what you're doing. So I'm going to end stream, and tomorrow we will go ahead and pick up the rest of this, and we'll finish up this episode in terms of the rough edit. And then if we finish up that fast enough, we can go right into the next section of actually cutting things out and mixing the music and all that fun stuff. So I will leave you with that, and thanks for watching, and I hope you'll return to Kevin's stream next time. Bye.